Meow meow. Hello. You know, yesterday was pretty bad for me, you know. But today it's okay. They sent me a message earlier. They told me to check if the exam is ready on my end. That's what I'm gonna do after the stream. Now, I hope we finish it. They finish checking like next week. And then if everything goes well, I can start opening my slots and be booked. So yeah, it's not gonna be random anymore. It's not gonna be chaotic anymore. I'm gonna have the I'm going to have freedom to open my slots. We're talking about work, huh? I don't gamble. If it doesn't work out, then I look someplace else. No, I cannot go back to my negativity. I can't take my mind off of how I used to be up until last year. How I would just, I think it's the 1,000th time I mentioned it on stream, how I lay in bed and just how I used to lay in bed and be crippled in fear. Fear of the future, fear of uncertainty. I don't even know. If you ask me, I don't know how I got over it. I don't know how I got over it. I'm not a brave person. I really don't know. I don't know. Like even it's pretty embarrassing to say, but by the end of 2024, I was already almost 2 years sober, but I still had that trait of being crippled in fear of the future. But I know you guys can tell that I'm still a very fearful person, but the difference is that I don't let it paralyze me anymore. If I let it paralyze me. I think I wouldn't even be I wouldn't even be applying to my previous company, you know. I wouldn't even go there physically.
You can't run.
So let me tell you about being profiled for for the account that I work for last year, 2025. So I went to the call center, and they told me that I should get a call, and I didn't get a call. I think it was an email for a meeting, and then the first one didn't actually accept me, So the first one was real estate. They didn't like me. No. I shouldn't assume that. Maybe they didn't see that I was a good fit. So they told me that I'm gonna be reprofiled, and then at that point I kinda lost hope. In my mind, they didn't accept me. I best start looking someplace else. But then I didn't get another interview, and yes, I didn't get another interview, and he took me in, man. He took me in. Of course, I don't wanna name names. Don't wanna drop names. I'm very grateful. Up until now, even though I'm not with them anymore. And of course, almost a year later, I resigned. And I have told my higher ups in advance that I'm resigning. A lot of them were trying to talk me down, talk me out of it. But yeah, I think I gotta go. Well, I've been playing on autopilot for the past 25 minutes. Gotta be grateful. Anyway, I discovered how to make the weapon I want for Razor. 50. On this too. Maybe I can exchange. I need 50, 50. White iron and the cyan one. Hold on, this is not what I want. Anyway, I just ate my breakfast, 2 eggs and 2 sausages. I'm looking here as if I have it's all more. Let's change it to what we need. If what we need is available. The freak. I wonder what that's for. What or who? I still need a teal one. HP. Excuse me. Lol. It's like I haven't been grinding for Masaria. So let's do artifacts, shall we? I never feel there anymore. Oh, maybe I was grinding for this on some other day and I just forgot. Maybe I should field her. Like also to practice.
Skies are clear, and the sun is...
Time for afternoon tea. Just sharpen my spear.
There's still a long road ahead.
Surprise!
With the
I definitely need to make her stronger.
Nice and spicy.
With the wind!
Trip on up. Let's see. Go up. Get them. Over here. Here to play with me. Over here. Over here. Shakana. Don't be nervous. Just relax. Look at me. Over here. Let me amuse myself a little.
Wind blade!
Over here.
So yeah, later I'm gonna be energetic. Lol.
Here!
Because you know I'm gonna review and then take the exam. And of course I've been reviewing, going through the material over and over.
Here to play with me.
Wind blade!
Step on over here. Calm down.
Getting myself familiarized with the process
Use the spotlight.
and the SOPs.
With the wind!
Over here. Let's see. Nice and spicy. Surprise.
Meow 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 meow.
Disappear!
Are you here to play with me? The more, the merrier.
Wind blade!
Let me amuse myself. Let's go. Let the magic be activated. It's the fire. Your toes. Over here. Surprise.
Yeah!
Let me amuse myself. You really know how to get me
Wind blade.
Let's see. The more, the merrier. Yeah. Over here.
Oh, it has a heal.
Over here.
It has a heal pala, no? It's the first time I saw that.
The more, the merrier.
It's the first time I noticed. And man, I really need a haircut. Gonna have to do that. I plan to do the exam before the working hours of our support. Who knows, maybe they can check today.
Disappear!
Calm down. Over here.
Come on.
I swear, it's for medical research. Floating? Zip on up. Frying pan.
Okay. That was a lot of grinding. Artifacts. But I don't even feel Janet. Wow. I haven't decided if she's the one I'm gonna level up with those. Anyway, that's it for Genshin Impact today. Meow meow meow. You know, I have a very dumb idea, which is not good. What if I multitasked? Like, I'll have my work laptop beside me and read. It's a very dumb idea. I shouldn't do that. It's not gonna help. I should have my undivided attention after the stream. Where's my nail cutter?
Let's roll.
Meow meow. Meow meow.
We can still do this.
I go be. Never mind, I go A. Meow 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 meow. No, I'm a Filipino man. I'm a grown man. Meow 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 meow.
Grenade.
Yo, hello.
Fire in the hole.
Hello, Ferrari Mona. How are you? How are you doing, man?
Throwing grenade. Incendiary.
Hi. What the frick? No, 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 no. Send to me. Meow, 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 meow. So are you a new sub or what? I don't recognize your what do you call this? Display name.
Terrorists win.
Meow, 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 meow. I go A.
Let's get our heads in the game. Grenade out. Throwing smoke. Incendiary out.
But they know that they know that the nation platform called Buy Me a Coffee. What's the name? Buy me a Big Mac. You know, I've been using that joke since 2018. I remember back in 2018, you know, it was Christmas or New Year, and I was playing Counter Strike. And then, of course, people were drunk. You know, one of them asked, what gun do you want me to buy you on Counter Strike? There's none. I don't even have. And I fear that I might never get that. But you know, I might set up buy me a coffee.
Move it, son.
There's one problem though.
Smoke.
We don't have Stripe in the Philippines.
Fire in the hole. Throwing fire.
You know, the way by which to collect money.
Deploying flashbang.
Oh, sorry. I don't think it's lagging. I think it's because I made it loud.
Deploying decoy.
You know, I got that idea from, you know, my own habit of listening to YouTube videos while going to sleep. Sometimes the ads will run and it's too loud. I know it's so distorted. How come we haven't won even once?
Push, push, push.
Come on, man. Hello? Ohio.
Incendiary. Decoys out.
Frick.
Throwing flashbang. Throwing flashbang. Throwing a grenade.
You know, I'm craving curry right now. Curry or curry. It's peanut. Ooh. It's nice. Peanut. And what do you, I usually watch scary stories. What's that? Come on, man, I hope this is rated G. I'm guessing you're a kid, man. I'm guessing you're a kid.
Throwing
Yes, I'm doing fine, thanks for asking.
fire in the hole.
You know, I've never played Roblox. Because I know that... Because I know what happens there, man. You know, the grooming.
Laying down smoke.
F1 racing. Where? This one. You want me to react to this? Well, I know I'm not a fan of F1.
Formula One, a motorsport nowadays that's easy enough for babies to understand, but also still has that dedicated fan base that will riot if a race is cancelled. Now, I've spent over 2 years explaining F1 to you guys, yapping to a microphone and destroying my back editing, but what I've never seemed to cover is what it's like to actually experience it. And it's simple. There are two ways to enjoy Formula One: real life and online. Actually, there is a third way through Drive to Survive and the F1 movie, but we won't be covering the mentally ill in this video. But getting straight into it, F1 in general is millionaires going in circles, drawn by a very linked hand. The higher they finish, the more points they score, and blah 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 become champion with the most points. Congrats, here's a metal dildo. Now, at the time you're just getting into the sport, there's a plethora of drivers to choose from, and you'll sometimes just see what they've done in a race and support them from there.
But when does this game get fucking good?
But sometimes it's a nationality thing, or a hand-me-down from generations, or maybe he's just a really handsome dude, to each their own. So you've chosen your driver, maybe a team, maybe you actually just have no clue at all, and now it's time to enjoy. Method 1, real life. Attending the actual races. Now, it would be impossible to keep up with F1 this way, the jet lag would have you microwave cereal, but there's 4 levels of watching F1 live. Level 1, general admission. This ticket costs you a fraction of the others, you get to roam around the circuit grounds, get food that either tastes amazing or is robbery, and overpriced merchandise that costs more than your ticket.
Ferrari fans, 147, 132. How does this look on me? It's 500 Singapore dollars, which is 388. And once again, not the sort of stuff you'll be wearing in Singapore.
I mean, seriously, $400 for a jacket? And not to mention, what is this, Ferrari? I could buy a pair of red clothes, slap a Ferrari logo, rub one out, and save $500. But in general admission, you don't get a seat or a clear view. You do still get to hear the cars roar and participate in track invasions where people have stolen adverts, the DRS sign while riding a bike, equipment, and potentially a piece of Charles Leclerc's soul. Highly dependent on whether Ferrari messes up. Level 2, grandstands. They are the reserved seats for an F1 weekend on these platforms. Prices vary depending on where you are. In the Middle East, you can get full weekend seats for under $500, but that's because it's a war zone. In 2022, a missile strike hit near the F1 Saudi Arabia track during a practice session just 6 miles away, and the greedy corporate fascists at the FIA, the governing body of Formula 1, still decided to keep things running. Whereas in the US, you can expect to spend up to $1,000 for just a day. In a grandstand, an F1 car would pass you about 60 times for roughly 2 seconds. So 22 cars times 60 times 2 divided by 60, you get to see 44 minutes of cars flying by per session. This is worth it in corners like Eau Rouge and Spa, every corner in Silverstone, Coda Turn 1, Albert Park Turns 9 and 10. But for these 2 tiers, weather is your worst enemy. In Spa, there's a 90% chance you're gonna be well beyond hydrated after the race. But sure, even if it's a hassle to watch F1 in real life, you spend thousands on transport, hotels, food, merchandise. You do it for the vibes. Going to F1 races can be a chore, but you'll get an experience you've never had.
Man, this is wrong, bro.
Before.
Sorry.
You get to hear the engines roar and maybe even mistake that as background score. Slam poetry. Then there's level 3,
I mean, what do you want to talk about? Maybe I can set up streams. Or maybe I can set up streams with, structure, I think I asked you guys yesterday if you prefer, how do you like this format? We just freaking freeform, don't really have a topic for every stream. I mean, yesterday I did have a topic. Me being, me feeling let down. But sometimes I do have a topic in mind. I do have a topic in mind, or I set up the stream to have a certain title, a certain mood, like that I feel let down. Any topics? Just asking. Of multiplayer battles, listening to some scary stories and stuff. This one I'm really considering going back to 12 noon. So yeah, let's keep listening to this. I'm not a fan of F1, but of course any info will help.
Paddock Club. This tier gives you paddock access near F1 hospitality stations, the drivers, reporters, and you'll notice that it's
So tier 1 is general admission. Oh, I just ate my breakfast actually.
Decoy.
2 Hungarian sausages and 2 eggs.
by influencers that have no clue what a hard tire is. But you do get insane lounges, get to be tip to tip with the cars, hopefully the drivers. There's fancy foods, on-track activities, and cool gimmicks if you ignore how much you spend. So I'm pretty sure Paddock Club is where you pay $30,000 to network with people that have been to Epstein's Island. You could spend like $300 getting wasted with multiple cardboard cutouts of F1 drivers in your room, and you'll feel like you're there anyway. And in case I forgot to mention tier 4, it's hiding in a tree or sneaking into the venue as fake security guards. Yes, this is real, and of course happens in Australia. You gotta respect the grind. And at the end of the day, all roads lead to watching F1 online. You could have the executive suite, but you still have to look at the big screens to keep track of positions. Even Fernando Alonso used the big screens, and this man was driving one of the cars. Oscar Piastri DNF'd in Baku, choked his 2025 championship, had a perfect view of the track, and still chose to watch on his phone. It's simply convenient. But watching F1 online was never as good as it is now. 10 years ago, we literally had a PowerPoint presentation that would shuffle through the bottom 10. Nowadays, you have team logos, leader intervals, gap between drivers, and tires. It gets simplified every few years that in the next decade, all that's left is what? Lewis Hamilton's cock? But if you're watching F1 alone, you first need to pay around $80 a year or $13 a month for a subscription on your preferred platform that has its different commentators.
The Miami Grand Prix is underway.
Miami Grand Prix in 2026. It's lights out and away we go.
There's also free TV broadcasts, or just go on some shady Russian website that will most likely steal your identity. Thankfully, I've already stolen someone else's. But well, you haven't seen me and Fernando in the same room. I rest my case. And watching can either be a chill afternoon, but if you're in the US and the next race is in Australia, you'll find yourself waking up at 3 a.m., eyes dry as a nun, and you're barely conscious. And if it's a stressful race with a championship on the line, you will be stress eating. You grab your popcorn, gone before the formation lap. You have a beer, gone the moment Ferrari enters the pit lane. Or it's a pretty boring race where the team you don't want to win is winning, or just nothing really happens. So you will be falling asleep until Crofty yells something like, "Through goes Lewis Hamilton into another unstable relationship." Now, as you watch a race weekend, free practice is on Friday where drivers learn the track and where fan delusions are the highest. Qualifying is on Saturday where drivers set lap times for grid position. Everyone's delusional up till Q3. And then we have the race. And actually there are 5 types of F1 races. First, peak F1. Canada 2026 is a great example. The whole race had overtakes for the lead, with a sprinkle of pit stop drama, crashes, midfield battles, and DNFs. Kimi and George fought until the kamikaze pilot's engine failed. Thankfully though, George did not react with unnecessary anger and borderline violence. Second, the championship fight with filler, a race where the only entertainment is 10 laps of a championship fight and nothing else matters. Third is the hazardous. Australia 2023 is a great example. DNFs within 4 laps, a gazillion safety cars, red flags, and the race ends with half the grid 6 feet under, both soil and in the standings. Fourth is the boring race, basically Monaco. Finally, fifth is the wet weather type, a race that either gets delayed or cancelled that is no longer a wet race, or it's hazardous with a mix of cars slipping everywhere, surprise performances, and shitty teams that's...
You know, when I was going to school back in elementary, I had a busmate, from the school bus who really liked F1. During that time, Michael Schumacher and everyone else. Oh, that's what I remember from him.
somehow end up in the top 5. And it almost always happens in Brazil. Brazil. But F1 is not always experienced on your phones all alone. That's how I usually experience it. But hey, at least there's the Patreon chat where everyone keeps reminding me that I did make a promise to start an OnlyFans at 1 million subs. I'm starting to fear that now. But F1 can also be experienced in bars, clubs,
You know, I can also do that.
the family living room, depends if you have a broken home or not, but there's also group calls or staying over at a friend's place. The Abu Dhabi 2021 reactions in sports bars were just crazy. You know how I said babies can even get into the sport? Look at this! F1 can change a life. This comment on Canada 2011 said, I was at this girl's place and we watched it. It was like 4 hours long, perfect, plenty of small talk in the red flag periods and time to make some espresso and bust out the snacks. Canada 2011 got me laid, man. And someone even said that my videos got them laid. So is your country suffering from declining birth rates? Send in Formula 1. Either the numbers will triple or there will be more losers that don't know how to interact with women. Hey, hold on, what are you pointing at? But similar to other sports, F1 isn't immune from criticism, not just from its own fan base, but also people outside. Like chess world champion Magnus Carlsen said this.
Formula 1 is like the most boring sport imaginable. Like you just drive around in a circle for a long time, even going there.
Man, his sport must be way more exciting for him to be talking this level of trash. Let me see a competitive clip from his world.
Get fresh after meals with Double Mint.
This B7000 glue is super easy to use, dries clear with no white marks, strong hold without leaving visible residue, perfect for phone repair.
Formula 1 is like the most boring sport imaginable.
Now yes, F1 is cars going in circles, but it's more than just that or overtakes. There's drama between drivers enough to rival reality shows, team internal politics, people get fired, hired, team radio crash outs.
Fucking blind motherfucker!
Max Verstappen is one front wing away from saying a slur, and there's crashes, contact, pit stops. Sebastian Vettel on a moped, drivers reacting with unnecessary anger, and borderline something. To be fair, if Magnus was talking about Monaco 2024, 2025, and so on and so forth, then I completely agree with him. Though I will say I recently dived a bit more into IndyCar, and they do seem a lot more hype over there.
Of a shot.
F1 as a sport goes through ups and downs. New car regulations either revive or damage the sport.
You know what? I'm craving energy drinks. Maybe I'll buy energy drinks today.
Or again, thanks to the FIA, whose last president was a fascist, and its most recent president's brother emailed Jeffrey Epstein asking for torture videos. There's no hope in humanity. I think we should nuke the entire planet. But after you're done watching, what else is there to do? Well, F1 social media. Though beware of those who LARP. Originally meaning live action roleplay, it now means performative or posing as a real fan.
Are you supporting anybody in particular today?
Oh my God, you know, I'm conflicted.
Are you supporting any particular driver or just F1?
I'm here for everyone.
TikTok can be filled with LARPers and brain-dead people, but at least they're happy there. Instagram is filled with racists and idiots, but they have the funniest material. F1 Twitter is similar to road rage. There's always someone crazier than you. Pinterest is where I find a lot of funny pictures, and you guys love me over there, so here's some big hugs and kisses. And another thing you want to know about F1 social media is death threats. Franco Colapinto fans almost beheaded Esteban Ocon for some track incidents. Kimi Antonelli got death threats for the 2025 championship, and so on and so forth. They're very common that I've gotten some myself. Someone was so angry that I made a terrorist joke about George Russell. Fun fact, I didn't make a single terrorist joke. I mean, I did make him a Japanese kamikaze pilot, but hey, I'm just trying to say he's a dedicated soldier. So with all my heart and soul, I responded with the Dutch national anthem. I'm so sorry. Look, F1 drivers are millionaires that commit tax evasion in Italy and could give less of a shit about some guy screaming on the internet about them. So I'ma glaze them, but I'll also call bullshit out. So here's F1 drivers in a nutshell. Piastri is a 13-in-1 shampoo bottle, not 14, because he's prone to choking harder than an unloved grandpa in a nursing home. George Russell performs but will kill you or himself if he feels like it. Max Verstappen is extremely fast but will definitely kill you if you're his rival. If George is a kamikaze pilot, Max is the squad leader. Pierre Gasly is the human embodiment of Little Caesars. He may not be the best, but boy will he always be there when you need him the most. Lance Stroll, the bar is in hell, so anything he does is seen as a miracle. But he also follows one of the worst Instagram accounts you could ever be caught following. Is the economy that bad that billionaire Nepo babies still want an extra $7,000? As for team principles in a nutshell, they're really prone to changing, so there's no point in covering them. But I do want to mention Zach Brown and how you could theoretically replace him with Donald Trump and you won't tell the difference. You want my proof? Here is my impression of Donald Trump as Zach Brown.
Hello, this is Donald J. Brown. Is this the Secret Service hotline? Now I just want to make this clear. I didn't have anything to do with Papaya Rules. That was fake news created by the radical Piastri fans. I have never blown Lando in the McLaren HQ bathrooms. That was a hoax, a very big one. Which is why I will now say $50 billion to the Stroll family.
But to wrap it up, in F1 everyone comes and goes like the designers who made the Ferrari merch. Things change all the time, contracts, staff members leaving, so you'll often find yourself switching team favorites every few years or even drivers every season. And while keeping up with this sport genuinely isn't the cheapest, it's the experience that you're paying for. That's the beauty of Formula 1, not just the crashes or overtakes, but the community, life trajectories changing, and the smiles we get after we watch an amazing race. Maybe the Formula 1 were the friends we made along the way, making it one of the best sports you can follow. Ruined by nut merch that cost $500. Fuck you, Ferrari.
Well, you know what? That's great information for the tiers of general admission and grandstand. Plant the bomb, green. Please plant. Please plant for long, bro. Here, no. Thanks. Then do you guys wanna listen to crime or funny stuff today? Scary, horror, crime. I mean, I don't have a good sense of humor and taste in funny stuff. You know what I might funny might not be funny for you. What you might find funny might not be funny for me.
Let's go.
You know, I'm starting to really like Gigi Morin. I mean, I don't really watch VTubers anymore, but you know, I really like Gigi. Though a few times I've seen her.
The family cat is still a cat. Kaya ang pagkain niya, dapat for cats din. Kulang ang nutrients ng lutong bahay.
Oh yeah, I've been feeding the black cat. There's a black cat that comes here. You know, I like it when he or she hangs out at the backyard. I feed him or her a piece of hot dog. And I put a water bowl for him or her. I want him or her to be there so that he or she can scare the mice, the rats.
It's a terrible day for Hololive. Gigi Murren from the Hololive English branch accidentally doxes herself live on stream in what is seen as an April Fool's prank gone wrong. In her recent stream, 1 hour of silence interrupted by Gigi Murren while watching things drive, she drops her camera midstream. And what you see might shock you. We managed to save the video before the stream was taken down. Absolutely terrifying.
Let's see that again.
It's a terrible... Absolutely terrifying.
I don't like collabs, I just wanna see her by herself.
Blah blah. Blah blah. Blah 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 blah. Wow. Wow. Wow.
No, that's Ina and Crony, right?
Hello.
Wow, one of our greetings was Kudo ni G. Wow. Wow.
Kudo ni G. Wow. Wow.
Kudo ni G. Wow.
Wow.
Kudo ni G. Wow.
Hi everyone.
Hi everyone. Welcome.
Hello.
Welcome.
Welcome. Woohoo.
Yay!
Our special stream.
Our very special yummy stream.
Yummy hungry.
Yummy hungry. Thinking about it makes me so hungry.
I got so hungry I started eating.
She was snacking. She was thinking about this and had a little snack beforehand.
Yes,
I know, because usually to combat looking at yummy food pictures, you gotta eat beforehand.
Exactly.
Otherwise, you won't be able to last an entire hour.
And there will be very yummy food pictures on screen. Warning! Make sure to get a snack or your tummy might rumble.
Ooh.
Oh, good warning.
I hope my tummy doesn't rumble.
Your tummy's
I
gonna
hope
be
so.
rumbly. Because we have a Koi Sushi collaboration! Yay!
Yay!
dishes of sushi curacao in a year?
In a year, we make roughly $1 million.
A million?
A million!
Wow.
1 million!
What's the most popular dish in Korea?
The most popular dish? So we do have a bunch of many changes, but the one that still comes out on
You know, I think I'm gonna make some coffee after the next round. You know, I just woke up like no, actually I got up like 2 hours ago.
top. This is golden crunchy.
Although I've
We're
been
making right now.
awake.
Golden crunchy.
Sounds fancy too.
Man, I'd really rather listen to like scary stories. I'd rather listen to scary stories and you know, sometimes I would crack jokes to remind myself, you know, to avoid what's happening in those stories, especially if it involves like bad people or people with ill intent. Okay, I'm gonna make coffee. Hold on. Oh, that's good. I got coffee. Now let's listen to scary stories. Excuse me. Closing time. What's this?
Today, I'm going to share 3 progressively more disturbing stories.
You know, sometimes I can see flannels or plaid shirts on the marketplace, and I'm kind of tempted to buy some, but you know, I really need to get to try the clothing before buying. So I prefer to go to like thrift shops. Yeah, mainly. Most of my collared shirts were thrifted.
That each have a famous, or I should say infamous video.
But you know, ironically, you know, my coworkers know this. I mainly wear sweatshirts, non-colored ones. You know, I try to look like a... No offense, everyone, okay? No offense, man. You know, I try to look like a construction worker or manual labor so that I don't get targeted by robbers. Right? Plus, you know, I'd rather wear sweatshirts rather than look lousy. Like if I don't dry my clothes properly, you know, the collar doesn't look good, or it has a lot of wrinkles, you know, that kind of lousiness.
That is associated with that story. And so after I tell each story, you'll actually get to see all or parts of those videos. But before we get into today's stories, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you've come to the right place, because that's all we do, and we upload 2, 3, even 4 times every week. So if that's of interest to you, please sneak into the Like Button's house and replace all of their toilet seats with homemade cardboard ones. Also, please subscribe to our channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. Okay?
Anyway, you know, I'm getting ahead of myself, but later. So, you know, long after the stream, I would be, you know, first thing I would do is I'm gonna be reviewing the processes. And then by maybe 7 a.m., by 7 a.m. I would be taking the exam if it's available already. Yeah, that's my plan.
Let's get into today's stories. On the morning of January 3rd, 2013, a 33-year-old man named Vladimir Sherbov stepped off a cable car at a ski resort in Russia. He was standing on the top of a snow-covered mountain along with his friend Denis Barakov and Denis's wife.
Hold on. Sorry about this. Hold on.
Whose name was Yekaterina. Vladimir and Denis went to this resort all the time, usually to snowboard. But on this day, they were not here to snowboard. They were here to try out an exciting new ride that all their friends had been talking about recently. It had been Denis's idea to come, but Vladimir had been totally on board until now that he was actually seeing this new ride itself. So the ride was actually set up straight ahead of them at the very top of the beginner ski slope. Now, where they got off from the cable car, it wasn't literally the very top of the mountain. It was like most of the way up. And when they got off the car, basically there was an additional stretch of mountain going up, you know, not particularly steep, but that stretch from, you know, the cable car to the top of this additional stretch was the beginner slope. And so from where they're standing, having just gotten off, they'd be looking up, you know, this beginner slope. And the ride is right there. It's basically on that slope. And Vladimir, who's looking at the slope, he's looking at the ride, he could see the ride operator standing at the top of this slope, basically waiting for customers to go on this ride. But to Vladimir, it was kind of weird because, you know, there wasn't really any signage for this new ride, and there was no line of people, at least that he could see, waiting to get on. And considering all the hype that Vladimir had heard about this ride recently, he'd expected something much bigger and more well advertised, where he could, you know, potentially get up here and watch loads of other people do it first before he did it. And so suddenly, Vladimir couldn't help but have just sort of a bad feeling about this. Like, why isn't anyone else doing this ride? Like, what's going on here? And so he turned to his friend, Denis, and he said he had a bad feeling, and he really wasn't sure if he wanted to do this anymore. But Denise was like really excited about this, and he begged Vladimir not to bail on this yet. And, you know, Vladimir could tell that Denise really was very excited. He wanted to try this ride, and he didn't want to do it alone. And so Vladimir was like, all right, fine, like, let's go do it. And so Vladimir, Denise, and Denise's wife, Yekaterina, they walk from where they got off the car all the way to the top of this bunny slope. And again, there's no line for this ride. It's just this operator sitting up there waiting for anybody who wants to do this thing. And so the two men, they go up and they paid $10 to the operator, who then in turn said, okay, climb inside, because the riding compartment, if you will, could hold up to 2 people. And so both Denise and Vladimir climbed inside. And after they did that, Denise actually handed his phone off to his wife, Yekaterina, and he told her, you know, take a video of us. I want to see, you know, what this ride looks like from the outside. And so Yekaterina, you know, she's got her phone. She's like, okay, you know, and she hits record and she's filming. And then, you know, Denise and Vladimir, they got tucked up fully inside of the compartment. The operator ensured it was ready to go. And then they were off.
Imagine redness calmed in seconds. Skin 104 centelepads.
Now, back inside the ride, once this thing had actually begun, Vladimir was actually pretty happy he had agreed to go, because this was actually really fun. He was positioned in the riding compartment basically directly across from Denise, who, you know, clearly he too was having a great time. He was laughing and screaming, you know, and having a great time. But after just a few seconds, the ride seemed to like change. It suddenly jerked to the left and then began going faster and faster and faster. Now, Vladimir and Denise had obviously never done this ride before, so they didn't know like how it actually was supposed to feel. But Vladimir felt like there is no way this is how it's supposed to feel. Like this is out of control. Like we cannot be going this fast. This is dangerous. And so as Vladimir is really starting to worry, he looked over at Denise, who's only, you know, a couple feet away from him, and he was not laughing and smiling anymore. He looked genuinely frightened. But before either man could really do anything at all, not that there was much they could do, the ride took one more horrible lurch, and then it just kind of like slammed down hard, and then everything went black. It would turn out Vladimir's bad feeling he got when he first looked up at the bunny hill and, you know, saw the ride basically unattended. You know, no one was in line, no one was doing the ride.
He really says, you know, a lot of times, just like me.
Like, how could that be? His bad feeling about that was spot on, because the ride was not safe at all. In fact, it wasn't even legal. The operator, the one who actually put both men inside of the ride, had stolen the equipment that was the ride and then set it up in this wildly dangerous location with no safeguards. So this ride that the two friends were on was really just a giant inflatable ball called a Zorb. The idea, you know, for this ride, for this experience, was that the riders would climb inside of the Zorb, almost like a human hamster ball, and then the Zorb would roll down the mountain like a huge slide. And it was supposed to be safe and fun, but it was not. And that's because the mountain that this ride was on was just way too steep and way too rough. Like this was a tragedy waiting to happen. And so as Denise's and Vladimir's Zorb went flying down the hill, it bounced a few times and then just totally veered off course. This is the video that Denise's wife captured from the top of that bunny hill, basically capturing their entire descent. You can see at some point one of the workers try to chase after the Zorb as it clearly just rolls away, but they can't keep up with it. And then in the final frames, you can see the Zorb speeding towards a cliff. The Zorb did ultimately go flying off that cliff, and as it plummeted through the air, Vladimir and Denise were ejected out of it. Vladimir was severely injured but would survive. As for Denise, unfortunately, he was killed. The ride operator was arrested, but they were given just a 4-year suspended sentence for the incident. This is a paid ad by BetterHelp. It's normal to long for a time when, you know, connection felt easy and being close to people didn't take so much effort. And then you take a look at your life now and it just feels different, busier and more complicated. I mean, there are moments I think about sometimes, you know, nothing big, just, you know, sitting with people I cared about, talking about nothing. You know, at the time, those moments themselves didn't feel important. But now, looking back, I think I'd tell that version of myself to cherish those moments as they were occurring because they don't last forever. And so someday, the relationships you have today may be the ones you wish you had held on to a little bit tighter. Therapy may be able to help you work through life's changes and provide the tools to navigate what's next, even if it looks different than it used to. BetterHelp makes starting therapy easier. Take the quiz and get matched with a credentialed therapist quickly. Switch anytime at no extra cost if it's not the right fit. BetterHelp has served over 6 million people.
Ferrari, I think I needed to hear you. I needed to read your message earlier. You told me to do something different today. And I'm sorry I don't really plan my streams. I just stream regularly and when I want to. So, but later in real life I will try to. I don't know, even if I don't have any goal today, aside from the maybe energy drink and eggs, I'm going out today to get those. So, that one message from you, that really means a lot to me. So, thank you for coming on the stream, man.
Globally. Click the link in the description or go to betterhelp.com/MrBallin and get 10% off your first month of therapy.
I'm rotting inside my room. Well, apart from fixing my bike for 2 days this week, going out to feed the cat,
On April 22nd, 2025, an Indian tourist named Rishi Bhatt pulled a helmet onto his head at the top of a zipline platform in the Baisaran Valley, which is a meadow at the border of India and Pakistan. It was a very beautiful, sunny day, and way down below him, he could see crowds of people strolling around and having picnics on the grass and enjoying this awesome spring weather. However, as the zipline operator fastened the belt and rope around Rishi's waist, something started to feel off. The operator was a local man who looked pretty normal and unassuming, but he had been weirdly silent the whole time Rishi was standing in line, and it seemed like he was sort of preoccupied with something. And considering his job and how potentially dangerous it was, it just seemed like this should be his focus, getting people on and off this ride. But instead, Rishi noticed that this operator kept squinting down into the meadow really intently, like he was watching someone or something down there, but Rishi would look down and there was nothing down there that was unusual, so he couldn't understand why this operator was so fixated on whatever was going on down there. It just seemed like a normal day. And so by the time Rishi was told he's ready to begin the ride here, he sort of felt like he didn't know if it was a good idea to trust this man with his safety. It just seemed like his mind was totally somewhere else. But Rishi had just watched a bunch of other people who had been, suited up by this guy, successfully navigate the zip line without any problems. And so ultimately, Rishi just sort of brushed off this budding anxiety inside of himself and just told himself he has nothing to worry about. This is going to be just fine. And so Rishi, when he was finally ready to go, he looked over at the other side to the other platform where he would eventually end up, where his wife and his 11-year-old son were, and he waved to them, sort of signaling he was going to start. And then he pulled out his phone and he hit record on the camera, and then he put it on his selfie stick and he sort of held it out, and then he jumped. And as you can see on Rishi's video, the first few seconds that capture him sort of beginning this ride, he was totally exhilarated. He's flying through the air over these breathtaking mountain views, the sun's on his face, he's laughing. But after about 20 seconds or so, Rishi heard that same zipline operator shout something from behind him. And so Rishi, he turns around and he looks back at this operator, who again is sort of fixated, looking down at the meadow below. And he's clearly looking at something down there really intently, like he had been, but now it seemed much more urgent. And so Rishi looked from the operator down to the meadow as well, and what he saw was horrifying. He saw all these people who just moments before had been having picnics and having this just like nice casual family time. They're all screaming and running off into the trees. And at first, Rishi like just couldn't understand what was happening. But then, like all the other people in the valley, he heard this terrifying noise. And suddenly he knew what was going on.
For my best tasting caldereta, I use UFC ready recipes.
When Rishi reached the end of the zip line, he immediately ripped off the belt around his waist and he grabbed his wife and his son and they began to run. Here is the video that Rishi took that day. So the people below him, as he starts down the zip line, were mainly tourists, like Rishi and his family. And most of them, like Rishi, were from India, the country that actually has control over the area where that valley is located. And here, you can see them all start to run. What you don't see, and what we are actually blurring out here, are the 4 anti-India militants who suddenly opened fire in the valley with Rishi. The terrifying noise that Rishi and everyone else heard was gunfire. And the shout that Rishi heard from that sort of distracted zipline operator, well, Rishi would come to believe that that had actually been a call to action for the militants to begin their attack, like the operator was in on it. Rishi and his family would survive this attack, but unfortunately, this was a massacre. 26 people, almost all of them Indian tourists, were killed.
Man, that's just evil, man.
On the afternoon of February 20th, 2014, 27-year-old Sarah Jones walked toward a bridge that was way out in the woods of Wayne County, Georgia. The film crew that she worked with was setting up on the bridge and on the banks of the river nearby, and Sarah could also see the director pacing around, looking really stressed and kind of jittery, and was clearly barking out lots of orders to everybody around him. And Sarah was also feeling pretty stressed herself. But she took a deep breath, and she told herself she just had to make it through a few more hours of this, and then she could go home. So Sarah was a camera assistant, and for the longest time she'd worked in television, but recently she'd been hired to work on a movie, and the movie was being shot out here in the woods. And this job was going to be very different than what she was used to. But not just because it was the difference between movie and TV. No, it had to do with the budget. So this was a movie, you know, that was sort of prestigious in a way, but it was going to be a really low budget movie that was called Midnight Rider. And the director sort of seemed like a total mess. He kept changing his plans like all the time, especially at the last minute. And today, he had just begun outright lying to the crew. Just that morning, he told the whole crew, you know, Sarah included, that they were heading out to this location in the woods just for a quick camera test to make sure the lenses and the lighting were right, but they weren't going to be doing any real filming. This was just pure testing. But once they got out to the bridge, the director sort of inexplicably changed his mind and said, actually, you know what, forget the test. We are going to do real filming today. We're going to shoot the whole scene for this bridge today. And this was like a really weird thing to lie about. And Sarah just didn't understand what this guy's problem was. It just seemed odd the way he was going about this. But now, you know, it was almost 4:30 p.m. and Sarah was carrying a bag of camera lenses over to the bridge to hopefully set up for their final shots of the day. And on her way, she happened to pass by the makeup artist, whose name was Joyce Gilliard. And she noticed that Joyce had a very strange expression on her face. And so Sarah stopped and actually asked Joyce what was wrong. You know, she's like, "You look worried, what's going on?" But Joyce just shook her head and said she had this funny feeling that they really were not supposed to be here. But, you know, just a minute later, Sarah had changed the lens on the camera and she was looking through the viewfinder, and this is what she saw. The cast and crew were on this narrow bridge made of wood and metal, and there was a rickety metal hospital bed right in the middle of the bridge. It was a prop. The scene was supposed to be this dream sequence about the main character's dead brother. So the actor playing the brother was lying on the hospital bed, and the actor playing the main character was standing a little further down the bridge with a guitar slung over his shoulder. And so once everyone was in their places, Sarah passed the camera to the cinematographer. He hoisted it onto his shoulder, and the director called for the crew to start rolling. However, at the same time, there was this deafening roar and a blast of loud noise, and Sarah felt this deep vibration through her whole body. And it was so disorienting that at first she couldn't even tell what direction it was coming from. But when she turned around, she saw the director motioning frantically for everyone to get off the bridge. And so Sarah slung the camera bag over her shoulders and tried to run, but the bridge was so crammed with people and equipment and props that she couldn't get through. And before she knew it, that horrible sound was on top of her. It would turn out Joyce was right. They weren't supposed to be there that day, but not because of anything spooky or superstitious. It was because the film crew literally was not legally allowed to be shooting a movie on this bridge. So that was the reason why the director had changed plans that day and lied about what they were doing. Because his application for a permit to film on that bridge had been denied that morning. But he knew if he told his crew that it was denied, they wouldn't then be okay with going out there and doing it anyways. And so he just sort of didn't tell anyone and sort of forced the crew to do it. He tricked them all to do it, basically. But it's like the director and his crew, they're out there on the bridge, the cameras are rolling, they're about to film this final scene when the disaster strikes. And the disaster that strikes was entirely predictable. It was literally the thing that this permit was denied because of. It was to avoid this type of disaster. Here is the last footage ever shot for Midnight Rider. You can see the actors and the crew scrambling to get themselves and this hospital bed off the bridge, and you can hear the roar and the blast of noise. Sarah is actually just out of frame. She's right behind the person who's holding this camera. And you can see right here the specific reason why the permit was denied. Because this bridge was an active railroad track, and there is literally a train barreling down on it. In the last few seconds of this footage, you can see the camera sort of tumbles. That's when the crew members who could not make it off the bridge in time instead pressed themselves up against the metal girders, trying to get as small and as sort of skinny as possible to avoid being hit by this train. But Sarah, unfortunately, was not fast enough. When the train came screaming by, it hit that hospital bed, and a piece of debris from it flew towards Sarah and pulled her back onto the tracks, directly into the path of the train. She was killed instantly. The rest of the crew that were on the bridge that day would survive, but a few other crew members were injured. As for the film's director, who put his whole crew in this awful situation, he pled guilty to involuntary manslaughter for Sarah's death, and he was ultimately sentenced to 2 years in prison.
That's why permits are important, people.
Take them down!
I'm laughing. You know, I'm laughing it off, but you know, common sense, please.
Thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you thought of today's.
Kasuk! Pick your targets well! Pull those Crawford legs! War machine ready! Come on! Obey me!
Tinding gutom? Isang pangmalakasang meal nga dyan? Ito! Jollibee Burger Steak! Saucier! Sarap! Ito pa! Oh, the new Burger Steak Supreme! Na-saucier sarap din! Lakas! Jollibee Burger Steak!
Both of today's stories are about people who made big choices that they thought would improve their lives. But neither of them really took the time to actually learn exactly what they were signing up for. That led to disaster. But before we get into today's stories, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you've come to the right place, because that's all we do, and we upload 2, 3, maybe 4 times every week. So, if that's of interest to you, please gift the like button a nice, brand new gumball machine. But don't tell them the gum is actually just painted balls of candle wax. Also, please subscribe to our channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. Okay, let's get into our first story called Dream Car. At 8 a.m. on June 8, 2015, 72-year-old James Lee Rogers parked his beautiful red Corvette in the parking lot of a Waffle House in Port Arthur, Texas. And as he pulled that car into the lot, James, he just felt so proud to be driving this vehicle. This was a 2007 C6 Chevy Corvette, pristine condition, and it was exactly the car that James had been dreaming about like his whole life. I mean, it drove amazing, it looked incredible, and more than that, it had all these modern elements to it. I mean, it didn't even have regular door handles. Everything was like push buttons and electric. I mean, to him, owning this car was like owning a really flashy sports car, and he thought that, anybody who saw him driving it, they knew this guy knew. And on top of having this really cool car, James also had like a pretty awesome life here in Port Arthur. I mean, he had lots of family in the area, he'd grown up here, he loved living here, but he also really loved this particular Waffle House. It was where he went basically every morning in his flashy car to get his coffee. But, it wasn't just their coffee that he was drawn to. It was the wait staff. It was the regulars who went to this Waffle House. This had become like a sort of second home for him, and he really looked forward to coming here basically every day. And so he parks his Corvette, he gets out, and before he walks into the restaurant, he has to tell his dog, he brought his dog along, Leia, this cute little dog, to stay in the car, because the dog was not allowed in the Waffle House. This was something new, but it was going to be great. So he told Leia, to be a good girl and stay in the car, don't rip it up, this is his dream car. She was a very good dog. And so she sat down, he shut the doors, used the electric push buttons to do it. And then once he knew his dog was secure, into the restaurant he went. Once he got inside, James took his usual seat at the counter where his friend MJ was already sitting. MJ was in his 60s, and like James, he was also a fixture at this Waffle House. And so the two immediately began chit-chatting about the weather and their kids.
I remember the old people I can see, sometimes at Burger King, sometimes at coffee shops, and yeah. It's pretty different here in the Philippines. The old people still stay at home, unlike in the US, where they usually go to the home for the elderly.
And then at some point, James ordered his coffee and used that as a chance to catch up with some of the wait staff that he spoke to every morning. And then
in retirement homes.
Eventually, more regulars began filtering in and out, and James made a point to chat with them and laugh with them as well. I mean, again, this was like his second home. And in fact, on this particular day, there were so many people that he wanted to talk to coming in and out of the restaurant that he decided, my dog's fine out there. I've only been in here for a few minutes. I'm going to order some food as well. However, right after James ordered his food, he turned and he looked out the window into the parking lot. And even though he couldn't actually see his Corvette, he could see that it was extremely sunny and very hot outside. Like, he knew that when he showed up, but I mean, he's looking out there and it just looks like a desert out there. It's so hot, and like there's nobody out there. It's just cars getting blasted by the sun. And he's thinking, like, Leia's out there. And even though he had the AC on when he pulled up, and so, likely his Corvette was still a little bit cool, there was no way that it was particularly comfortable in his car right now. And so, before his food showed up, James turned to MJ and just said, "Hey, I'm going to be right back. You want to just like hold my seat? I'm going to go out and check on something." And MJ, who was kind of busy talking to other people, he's like, "Yeah, go ahead. I'll save your seat." And then James left the restaurant to go check on Leia. And so James, after leaving the Waffle House, he sort of ran around the corner out of view of where he had been sitting, and he went over to his beautiful dream car. And as soon as he walked up to the window, he could see that Leia was, very excited inside, happy to see James again. And, just for good measure, even though he now knew his dog's okay, he climbed inside the driver's seat and shut the door, and he turned around and he pet his dog, and he could tell the temperature inside the car was not that bad. And so he was only going to be in the restaurant for another 15, 20 minutes tops. She'd be okay. However, after only having sat inside his car for a matter of maybe like 30 or 60 seconds, he felt himself getting really hot. I mean, it was definitely not cool inside the car, and the sun's burning through the windows, and he just was like, you know what? This is not responsible to leave my dog in here. I can't do this. And so even though he had placed his order for food, he figured he could go in there, cancel the order. He was a regular, they'd understand. He could have one more sip of coffee, but that was it. He needed to get back out here and basically put the AC back on and get him and his dog back into the comforts of their own home.
What the freak?
But when James pushed that super fancy button on his car door that he was sort of so proud of how modern his vehicle was, when he pushed it to open his door, nothing happened. And so James, he's just staring at the door in confusion because this has never happened before. And so he starts pushing it a few more times. But again, nothing happened. And then after a few moments, when this car door was not budging, James reached across and started pushing the button on the passenger side door to see if maybe it was just an issue with, his door. But no, that door wouldn't open either. And so finally, he decided he would just try to turn the car on to see if maybe that would help. But he couldn't get his car to turn on. The Corvette was completely dead, and James had no idea why. But he knew this was not good because, this car, because it's so modern, didn't have normal handles. They really were all electric, all buttons. And so if these buttons aren't working and all the windows are up, what do you do? How do you get out? And so James, he's starting to stress out about what's going to happen here? Is he going to have to break a window of his beloved vehicle here? Is that what he's going to have to do? And also, how crazy is that? How could he have wound up in this position? But also, the sun is just burning through the glass and he's suddenly becoming really aware of just how hot it was getting inside of his car. This is sort of becoming an emergency really quickly. Because again, he can't even turn on the car, so he can't turn on the AC. He's inside of an oven at this point. And so James instinctively reached for where his phone would normally be, but it wasn't there. And that's when he remembered he had left his phone inside the Waffle House. When he had gone in earlier, it was low on charge and he had handed it off to one of the waitstaff to go plug in somewhere. And so his phone's inside. He has no way to contact anyone. But luckily, right at that point, James looked out the corner of his eye and he saw a couple walking out of the Waffle House. And he's like, oh, thank goodness, someone's coming out. I can get their attention. They can come over here and get me out of here. Or at least, call someone who can. And so he starts waving, through the front windshield at this couple as they're sort of walking generally in his direction, but they clearly didn't see him. The sun is glaring off the glass, kind of making it hard to see inside. And so James is sort of realizing this, and he's becoming more and more desperate as he and his dog are getting more and more overheated. And so he began leaning on the horn to get their attention that way, but no sound came out of his Corvette because the horn was powered by electricity, and again, the car is dead. And so James now is getting frantic. He's banging on the windows. He's screaming to them. But this is a nice car. It's totally soundproof inside. Again, there's the glare from the sun on the glass. The windows are partially tinted. They can't see or hear him. And so this couple eventually comes right near his vehicle. They climb in their car and they drive away without ever noticing him. Once they were gone, James told himself that, this is a busy area. Lots of people come in and out of this Waffle House. Someone's going to see us. Someone's going to get us out of this car. And so for the next several minutes, James looked all around him, looking for anybody walking through this parking lot, looking for people coming out of the Waffle House, and anybody who came even close to his vehicle, he would scream and yell and bang and do anything he could to get their attention. But nobody noticed him. No one could see or hear him. And now James and his dog were really starting to struggle with the heat inside of this vehicle. It really was like they were trapped inside of an oven. And so eventually, when it seemed like no one was going to notice them, James just began frantically looking around the interior of his car for a toolkit. He thought he had left a toolkit in here somewhere, in case of emergencies. And he's thinking, maybe there was a tool in there he could use to, maybe jimmy open one of the doors, or if he had to, he could maybe use something heavy in the toolkit to break a window, just to get out that way. And so eventually, in the back seat near Leia, he found this toolkit, but when he cracked it open, he was disappointed because it really didn't have anything that useful. There were some pliers, there were some jumper cables, and a flashlight. But, James, he still took the pliers and he jammed the head of the pliers into the crack of the driver's side door to attempt to basically wrench open the door. But the pliers were very thin.
Doesn't he know that you can take the headrest of the chair and then use that to break the window? Is it just me with that question in my mind? Like you can hit the window at the edges. The edges are where it's easiest to break. The edges, not the middle.
And so he didn't budge the door at all. And he used a lot of energy trying to, force the door open. And remember, it's like blisteringly hot inside of the vehicle at this point. And it's getting harder and harder to breathe. Like Leah's struggling to breathe. James is, drenched in sweat. And so he drops the pliers and he just has this huge wave of anxiety come over him that like, oh my goodness, like, is this it? Are we going to die in here?
Tasting sipo egg, I use UFC Fresh Selections.
And so as like this crushing reality is coming down on him, James has this adrenaline surge and he leans back in his seat and he starts kicking as hard as he can against the glass with his feet to try to break open the windshield or kick open the driver's side window. But amazingly, despite all of his energy going into this, he didn't crack the window at all. Like it felt like he was kicking a concrete wall. There was no budge, nothing. And so again, after exerting even more energy and now sweating even more and it's getting harder and harder to breathe, James took those pliers and he's really gassed, he can barely breathe, and he starts smashing the head of the pliers into the window. That didn't do anything.
Man, wasn't he aiming for the edges?
So it's like, I can't do anything to get out of this vehicle. And so James, he sort of just like lays back in the driver's seat, which he had reclined at this point, and he's panting, he can barely breathe, he's opened up his shirt a little bit, and he's looking back at his dog, and she's really struggling, and he's just like, I can't believe this is happening. And as he's laying there, he sort of looks towards the front of the car, and his eyes land on the glove box in front of the passenger seat. And it was like, oh my goodness, how could I forget? There's a manual inside of there.
Bro, I thought he has a handgun inside. When I think about American plus glove box or glove compartment, I automatically think gun.
There has got to be instructions for what to do if your car dies. There's got to be a way to get out. Like, it's got to be in that manual. And so suddenly, having all this energy, James sat up, he opened up the glove box, and he pulled out this manual that he had never read before. I mean, he had no reason to. But he opened it up, and he began looking through it, looking for, the section that would explain what to do in case of, total power outage and you're stuck inside the vehicle. But like as he's looking at the pages, like his vision's swimming, it's so hot, he's so tired, and it's all this little text, it's hundreds and hundreds of pages, and like nothing explained the situation. It was like so not,
user-friendly. And so James, he's flipping through all these pages, and even just the act of turning the page was becoming so laborious, like he is just beginning to shut down. I mean, he's basically dying inside of an oven, and he can barely turn the page, and then before long, after about a quarter of the way through, it's like he couldn't see anymore, and he literally just like he couldn't turn the page anymore. He had no strength left. MJ, so James's buddy, the guy in his 60s who was also a regular at the Waffle House, he's inside the Waffle House. He's having his breakfast and his coffee. He knew James had stepped out. You know, he was going to be right back, and he did not come right back, but he figured no big deal. Like, you know, he probably got caught up with something. Maybe he forgot that he had ordered food, but, you know, MJ, he's got all these reasons for why James has not come back to the restaurant. And also, MJ, being a regular, he's chatting it up with other people. He's not really even aware of the fact that James has not come back inside the Waffle House. And eventually, after MJ had had his coffee and his food, he's getting ready to maybe make an exit himself when two employees come running in the front door of the Waffle House. And so everybody turns to these employees who clearly are sort of making a scene here, and they're like, what's going on? And the employees, they're like, we just saw James. He's asleep in his car, and we can't open the doors. We slammed on the windows, but he's not reacting. At this point, MJ felt sick to his stomach because he suddenly realized when he looked at his watch, it had been 4 hours since James had gone outside saying he'd be right back.
Man, he's been in the Waffle House for 4 hours. You know, I can't imagine how much he has witnessed, you know. People complaining about their orders, complaining about the service, blah blah blah.
Now, MJ, you know, he got caught up doing other things, and he was in here
people fighting each other
all the time. He loved being here. Time flew when he was in here, but even he didn't understand how much time had passed. And he's thinking oh my gosh, what's happened to James? And so MJ jumps out of his seat and he runs outside into the blistering heat. He goes around the corner to the red Corvette. He sees, through the tinted glass, there's James inside of the vehicle. He starts hitting on the window, but there's no answer. James isn't moving. And so MJ calls 911. It would turn out when James bought the red Corvette, it really was like his dream car. He fell in love with it. It was beautiful. It was flashy. It oozed status. It had all this new tech. It looked so expensive. It was perfect. And James, he didn't just, buy this car and that was it. After he had it, he obsessed over it. He learned every little detail about it. He took great care of it. He drove it everywhere. This was like his child. But despite, really obsessing over the car, he never learned one really important thing about this car, which is, what do you do if you happen to be inside of the vehicle with the windows rolled up and your power goes out? Because the doors are not regular doors. They're powered by buttons. They're electrical. And if you have no power, you can't open them, as he found. Well, it turns out there's actually a lever under the driver's seat that once you pull it up, it pops open the driver's side door and you can get out, no matter if there's electricity or not.
Womp womp. That could have... Well, let's not get ahead of ourselves. I was gonna say saved his life, but he hasn't been pronounced unalive yet, so...
But that information was buried on page 80 of that owner's manual that he had pulled out and begun flipping through, but he was so delirious from heat exhaustion, he couldn't get that far into the manual. He's combing through all this really dense text. He made it about a quarter of the way through when unfortunately he and his dog Leia died from heat exhaustion.
Oh man.
James's family filed a wrongful death case with Chevrolet, the maker of the Corvette, in 2018. But the case was dismissed. Chevrolet still makes Corvettes with these special electric doors, and there have been numerous additional incidents of people getting locked in and trapped. But in more recent Corvette models, the manuals have the information about the door's release lever much closer to the front of the manual.
That's very chilling.
Smashers! Are you excited for this?
I am really excited. Guys,
Hey man, it's a good thing he has a friend though. I mean, MJ. It's a good thing there's someone who's got his back, who called 911.
On the morning of August 20th, 1862, a 17-year-old farmhand named Jean Leroux carried his axe over to a stack of logs by a barn on a farm in Ottawa Township, Minnesota. As a farmhand, Jean was responsible for lots of different odd jobs, like splitting the firewood and feeding the animals and helping with the crops. Basically, Jean had to know every single inch of the farm and the woods that surrounded it, and how to take care of it all. But even though he was basically constantly busy, Jean still found his mind wandering to a place that was sort of difficult, which was he felt a lot of times pretty homesick. So Jean was actually from France, and he had left behind his whole family and his, previous life to come here to America, where there was supposed to be more opportunity. However, America was turning out to be a pretty violent place. The country was currently fighting the Civil War. And on top of that, the area specifically where Jean lived was pretty much like the frontier. And so there were these constant territorial disputes and virtually no law enforcement. So just a really dangerous place. But more than any dangers he faced, Jean just really missed his family, especially his mom. So he spent basically every spare minute he had, which was, few and far between, sitting out in the woods by this one particular just huge, beautiful oak tree. And he would sit at the base of it and he would make journal entries about basically everything he was doing so he could track it all and know what to tell his mom when he finally got to see her again. He just wanted to tell her all about his experience. Also, just for context, Jean had saved virtually all the money he had worked so hard to acquire. And his whole plan was to eventually send that money to his mother, who he loved so very much and missed so much. But more and more, like the more homesick he became, the more he wished he could actually just go back to France and get out of America and literally hand the money to his mom and just see her again and be done with this whole America experiment. But for now, Jean raised his axe over his head and he brought it down on the log that he was going to split. And it did, it split open, and he raised the axe again to chop another log, but as he did, he froze, because off in the distance, he could hear a series of repetitive booming noises, like really loud. And for Jean, immediately his heart started to race and he was so scared because he knew what those were. Those were gunshots. And he was terrified that the thing that he, and really everybody else in his town, had been scared of for days was now finally happening. So right on the other side of the woods that surrounded the farm was the Minnesota River. And over the last decade, lots of people had settled along this river. And there'd been a town established right nearby, and new homes were being built constantly. However, all the expansion had literally forced out the indigenous tribe who had previously lived in the area, the Sioux. And after being displaced, these Sioux had struggled to find food and a place to live, while the settlers just continued to expand and take more of their land. So finally, just 2 days earlier, the Sioux had had enough, and they finally retaliated, attacking settlements along that river. It was being called the Sioux Uprising, and the attacks so far had been horrific. A lot of farms along that river had been burned to the ground, and their occupants had been killed right alongside it. And then, just yesterday, the Sioux had attacked a city that was just 50 miles down the river from where Jean was right now. And so Jean and everybody else in this particular area had really been terrified the last 24 hours that the violence was moving in their direction towards Ottawa Township. And so now Jean, he had put his axe down and he just stood there, trembling as the sound of gunshots continued. This was not just a few stray bullets. This was a barrage of gunfire. And so this could only mean one thing. The Sioux were here. Now, Jean couldn't tell exactly where the shooting was coming from, but he could tell it was pretty close. And so Jean knew that he likely only had maybe several minutes to gather up whatever he could of his possessions and get to safety before the Sioux arrived. So Jean, he bolts over to the farmhouse, goes inside, and he goes to the area inside where he slept, and he grabbed his rifle, and he also grabbed his notebook and all that cash he'd been saving for his mom. And he jammed the notebook and the cash into the satchel, and with his rifle over his shoulder, he ran back outside. And then once he was outside, he sprinted right towards the tree line at the edge of the property. And after running for a little while, Jean finally stopped to catch his breath and to listen to see if there was more gunfire. And as he sat there listening, he couldn't hear anything. But that's when he realized, like, he's all alone out here. If the Sioux came charging through the trees right now, he wouldn't stand a chance, even with his rifle. But Jean had an advantage. He knew these woods like the back of his hand. He was in here all the time. And because of that, he knew exactly where to go to find safety.
Meow meow.
About an hour later, Jean's boss and the owner of the farm, Edward Gleek, hustled from his farmhouse towards town. Mr. Gleek had also heard the gunshots. I mean, basically everybody in town had. And he had come running out of the barn just in time to see his farmhand, Jean LaRue, bolting off into the woods. And, Mr. Gleek, he didn't blame the kid. He was also horrified by the recent attacks and was also very worried that those shots they were hearing were a sign that trouble had finally arrived in their town. But after all these gunshots, no Sioux warriors showed up in town. And so now Mr. Gleek was heading to the town center to see what had actually happened. Like, what were those gunshots? Now, Mr. Gleek had sort of accepted that this could have been something totally benign, or it could have been the Sioux. He didn't know. But he was just going to find out. He was rational, he was calm, despite, the risks here. But when he got into the town center, all he could see was just chaos. Many of the area's residents were out running around, carrying trunks and bags and all their belongings like they were fleeing the area, much like Mr. Gleek's farmhand, Jean LaRue, had looked like he was doing. However, it didn't take long for Mr. Gleek to hear what had happened, and it was not an attack by the Sioux. Those people running around like maniacs, fleeing the area, they just hadn't heard the real story yet. They were sort of operating like there was an attack coming. So apparently, a group of American soldiers had been riding on a boat up the Minnesota River, and for some reason, they just gotten overly excited and began firing their guns repeatedly. So those were gunshots. And unfortunately, because they were gunshots, they completely freaked out all the residents around the river because of this growing threat of the Sioux attacking. But fortunately, at least in this case, there were no attacks. This was just, an unfortunate event. And so after hearing this, Mr. Gleek went back to his farm to find John and tell him that, everything was actually just fine. But when he got there, Jean still had not come back yet. And when Mr. Gleek went into the woods to go look around for him, he couldn't find him. Now, Mr. Gleek figured that Jean would eventually find out what happened, much like everybody else in town. Not everyone had the news yet, and so at some point that day, he was bound to return. But by the time night fell, Jean still had not come back. And then the next day, Jean didn't come back. And the next day, and the next day, he just didn't come back. And so finally, after repeatedly searching his property and asking all over town if anybody had seen Jean, Mr. Gleek finally came to the conclusion that Jean must have fled because of this Sioux attack, and then likely gone back to France to be with his mother, something he knew he wanted to do anyways. Maybe this was his excuse. 57 years later, on a morning in July of 1919, Mr. Gleek sat on his porch looking out over his farm, the same farm that Jean had been a farmhand for 57 years earlier. Mr. Gleek was old now, and so he could no longer actually physically work on the farm himself. So instead, he had to hire entire crews to do various jobs. And in fact, right now, he had a whole bunch of workers out in the woods clearing away some dead brush for him. And so as Mr. Gleek is just kind of surveying his property, he notices a worker come running out of the tree line and starts waving at Mr. Gleek really frantically, like he had something really important to say. And then as the man got closer, Mr. Gleek could see that this worker looked terrified. And before Mr. Gleek could ask what had happened, the worker, whose face was white as a ghost, said Mr. Gleek needed to come and see something. And so Mr. Gleek, who was, very intrigued at this point, managed to haul himself up, and he slowly hobbled off into the woods with this worker. And as he got to where the rest of the crew was, inside the forest, he saw that they were all mostly gathered around this very large, recently downed oak tree. And the whole group was very quiet and tense. And they were all just staring at a section of this tree that had split open. When Mr. Gleek joined the group and looked at this particular section of the trunk of this tree, this hollow part, at first he didn't even know what he was staring at. It was just this hollowed out sort of split section of the tree, and there was a few items that didn't belong there that were inside of it, like a cachet of sorts. But then he sort of fixated on one particular item, and that's when he understood why the group was just so stunned. And as he stared and sort of took in what he was seeing, he suddenly became utterly horrified. It would turn out, when Jean ran off into the woods 57 years earlier, he used his intimate knowledge of the farmland and the surrounding woods to escape what he thought was a very dangerous situation. And he did that by hiding. Jean knew that oak tree, where he would always go when he would write in his notebook, happened to have a hollow trunk. He figured he'd be just the right size to crawl inside of there and stay in there hidden until the Sioux were gone. And so Jean had made it to the tree, and he had wedged himself inside of there, totally out of view. And then unfortunately, he got stuck. From inside the trunk of the tree, Jean had managed to write one last letter to Mr. Gleek, saying that he couldn't get out, he was stuck. And if he did die here, to please give all his money to his mother in France. And so decades later, when Mr. Gleek's workers cut that big oak tree down, what they found inside of the hollow trunk was Jean's gun, his money, his notebook, and his mummified body.
Sound strategy.
CDO Homestyle Chili Garlic Corned Beef. Juicy sarap na may kick ng chili garlic. Try mo na!
Like, nope. So she comes over, she gives him a hug and a kiss. She goes back to bed.
What the frick?
Today we have another special bonus video for you. It'll be a collection of 5 more fan-favorite nightmare-inducing stories. And don't worry if you've heard or seen these before, because we have totally re-edited all of them, so the viewing experience will be all new. But before we get into those stories, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you've come to the right place, because that's all we do, and we upload once a week. So if that's of interest to you, please sneak into the like button's house and reverse all their toilet paper rolls, so instead of feeding out from the top, they feed out from underneath like a serial killer. Also, please subscribe to our channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. Okay, let's get into today's stories. In 2004, Mitch was in his final semester at a college in Louisiana when he met another senior, a wonderful young lady named Kayla. From the instant he saw her, he knew he was in love. She played hard to get at first, but after several months, he won her over. After graduation, the pair stayed in Louisiana and moved in together while they got their careers off the ground. 2 years later, the pair got married, and almost immediately, Kayla got pregnant. At the time, Mitch's career was really starting to take off, which allowed Kayla to stay at home and take some time off. By the time their daughter was born, Mitch was making so much money that Kayla decided to just stay home and be a full-time mom. A couple years later, Kayla got pregnant again, and by the time their daughter was 2 years old, they had their son. Mitch adored his children. Every morning before he went to work, he would sneak into their room and he would watch them sleep, and then in the evenings, they would have these big family sit-down meals and then play games together until bedtime. Mitch's life was perfect.
Shortly after his son's birth, Mitch was lounging on the couch in his TV room when he noticed out of the corner of his eye the red lamp in the corner of the room. It just looked funny. It was almost like the light itself was blurry, but when he looked a little bit closer at it, the entire lamp looked blurry. And so Mitch looked around the room and nothing else was blurry. He rubbed his eyes and looked back over at this lamp and it was still blurry. He turned the TV off and walked over to the lamp, and even though he was right in front of it, the lamp was still blurry. And Mitch didn't have bad eyesight, and so he's thinking, is there something wrong with me? Am I having a stroke? Do I have an aneurysm? Is there some sort of illness here that's making me see this lamp blurry when it's really not? But Mitch told himself he was healthy and that whatever this was, it was an anomaly and nothing to worry about. And so he went back over to the couch, turned the TV back on, and tried to ignore the lamp. But as he was watching TV, out of his peripheral vision, he couldn't help but notice this weird blurry lamp. And so finally, he turned the TV off again, and he turned to look at this lamp. And now, in addition to being blurry, it appeared to be upside down. Now Mitch was genuinely concerned that there was something wrong with him, because again, nothing else in the entire room was blurry or upside down. It was just this lamp. And so a few minutes later, his wife and his kids came home, and Mitch decided he would not tell them about this lamp. He didn't want to alarm them. He figures he will get to the bottom of this blurry lamp, and then he will tell his wife and kids. And so that night, the family has a sit-down meal, and then afterwards they play some games together, and then everybody goes upstairs and goes to sleep. But after everyone had gone to sleep, Mitch was just laying in bed thinking about this lamp. And so finally, he snuck out of his bed and went downstairs to the TV room, and he sat on the couch, and he just stared at this lamp. And for hours and hours, he just fixated himself on this lamp, watching it kind of morph around and turn upside down and get blurrier and blurrier by the second. The next day, Kayla found Mitch lying on the couch, passed out, and she asked him if he was okay. And again, Mitch didn't tell her about this lamp that was still blurry. He just told her that he wasn't feeling well and he was not going to go to work that day. But Mitch didn't go to work for 3 more days. He just sat on the couch and stared at this lamp. And Kayla obviously picked up on this strange behavior and kept poking and prodding to get more information about what was going on, but Mitch never told her the truth about this lamp. He just kept telling her he felt sick. She urged him to go see a doctor, but Mitch told her it would be fine, he'd get better. And then over time, as this lamp continued to morph and get bigger and get stranger and stranger, Mitch suddenly was unable to respond to his wife. He became totally unresponsive. And so obviously his wife became desperate and called the doctor. And as she's on the phone with the doctor trying to get advice about what to do, Mitch realizes the lamp is now growing in leaps and bounds. And before long, the lamp is the entire size of the room. And all he can see is the red color of this lamp. And then Mitch starts to hear these voices, these screams coming from somewhere in the distance. And then he feels this blinding pain in his head. And then he opens his eyes and he looks up and he sees he's laying on the sidewalk next to one of the buildings at his college in Louisiana. And surrounding him is this crowd of people with wide eyes that are staring at him. Mitch had no idea what was going on, and so he naturally just began scanning the crowd, looking for Kayla and his kids to try to figure out, how he got here. But before he could ask any questions and before he could find his wife and kids, a police officer ran through the crowd, picked him up and ran him over to his police car, put him in the back, and then began driving away. And so while Mitch is in the back of this police car, he turns to the officer and he says, "What's going on?" And the officer would tell him he was attacked by a huge college football player. He got hit in the head and he fell backwards and he hit his head again and he fell unconscious. Mitch asked the officer where his wife and kids were, and the cop said he had no idea. And that's when it clicked for Mitch. The lamp wasn't real. Neither was his wife, neither was his daughter, neither was his son, neither was his wife. For the past 10 years, it was all a hallucination while he was unconscious after—
Damn, bro, damn. God. Damn.
getting attacked. Mitch was brought to the hospital where he would make a full physical recovery, but after being released, he was horribly depressed, and he had to get intense therapy to basically grieve for the loss.
None of his wife and kids were real. Damn, bro. What the frick?
Of his family that never existed. These days, Mitch says he can barely remember what his family even looked like, but periodically in his dreams he will catch a glimpse of his son in his peripheral vision, and his son is perpetually 5 years old and he's trying to talk to his father, but Mitch can never understand what he says.
Yeah, that's pretty sad. I saw a post about that before. Like, she was in a coma for, I don't know, maybe just months. But then, she had this hallucination or dream that she's had like a daughter or something for years.
In 2006, a 20-year-old woman named Sarah started having some very strange dreams about a woman named Aurora. She had a very striking face with sharp features.
I know this one already.
And long black hair. Now, her dreams varied. Sometimes Sarah was in a crowd of people, or she was at her office, or she was just alone in a room. But in all of her dreams, Aurora would always show up. Either she would interact with Aurora and they would speak, but Sarah could never remember what they actually spoke about, or Aurora would just be in the crowd or in the background just watching Sarah. Now, she had these dreams enough that eventually Sarah began to think, I must know someone named Aurora. I must have come across this person, and now they're just kind of manifesting in my brain at night when I'm sleeping. And so she began going through her older posts on social media to look in pictures of her and of her friends to see if there was a woman with striking features and long black hair that was this Aurora person in her dream. But after looking through hundreds and hundreds of pictures, she couldn't find any indication that she had met this person, at least not according to her social media.
Not yet.
Yeah. And so Sarah began just going on Google and typing in Aurora, long black hair, striking features. Has anybody dreamed about this? To see if there were people talking about having this type of dream on the internet. But she had no luck. Eventually, after about 3 or 4 months of having these strange dreams that Aurora was in, Aurora stopped showing up in Sarah's dreams. It was like it suddenly was all over. And so very quickly, Sarah just kind of forgot about it. A few years later, on Halloween night 2009, Sarah and a friend pulled off the highway into a gas station. They had been out with some friends celebrating Halloween, and now they were making their way back home. Sarah pulled into an empty spot right in front of the convenience store, and after they were parked, Sarah and her friend got out, they went inside, they got some snacks and drinks, and then they came back outside and climbed back into Sarah's car. A few moments later, Sarah had turned her car on, she had backed out, and she had driven past all of the gas station pumps, and she was making her way towards the single-lane strip of road that merged out onto the highway. It was how anybody who got into this gas station got back out onto the highway. And so as she's getting closer to the entrance of this short merge road, her phone suddenly rings. What happens next occurred over a span of just a few seconds. So it might seem like this is over several minutes, but this all happened pretty much simultaneously. So she's pulling up to the entrance of this merge road, her cell phone rings, and because there was no one behind her, it was not a busy night, Sarah decides to just stop her car, put it in park so she can safely take this phone call. And so she stops her car pretty much right in front of the entrance to this merge road, and she picks up her phone, she looks at the number, and she doesn't recognize it, but she picks it up anyways, and she says, hello. There was silence on her phone, and as Sarah is saying, hello, is anybody there? Another car from the gas station pulls up right behind Sarah's car, and they start honking their horn immediately. They're in a huge rush. And so Sarah, who's totally embarrassed that she's blocking traffic, she hangs up the phone, she puts it down, she puts her car back in drive, and she hits the gas. But this driver behind her is apparently in such a rush, they're so impatient, that they actually swerved around her, driving on the dirt off to the side of the road just to get around her, and then they sped off down the merge road back onto the highway. And literally, seconds later, another car that was already on the highway, a silver Honda Civic, lost control and smashed into this car that had just passed Sarah's car. So there's this huge car accident literally right in front of Sarah and her friend, who have now stopped the car. They're right at the end of the merge road looking at this horrible accident that they narrowly escaped. Sarah put her car back in park, she picked up her phone, and she called the police. When the police showed up a few moments later, they took down Sarah and her friend's version of events, and then a little while later, after the ambulances had left and after the two cars had been pulled off of the highway, one of the police officers pulled Sarah aside and told her that the driver of the Honda Civic and the driver of the car that had swerved around her had both been killed in the accident. Shocked, the only thing Sarah could think to do was to call back that number she didn't recognize that had effectively stopped her from getting onto the highway and maybe even stopped her from being hit by that Honda Civic. And so she wanted to talk to this
This is pretty awesome, you know.
person and thank them for saving her life. But when she called the number back, the person did not pick up. However, it went to her voicemail. And it said, "Hi, you've reached Aurora. Leave your name and number after."
Aurora.
Sarah could not believe it. She said she had never felt goosebumps like that in her entire life. The next day, Sarah tried calling the number again, and this time the woman, Aurora, answered the phone. The two got to talking, and Sarah explained her crazy dreams and now this crazy car crash thing and how it's all connected. And Aurora would tell Sarah, like, "That's amazing. This is a crazy story you're telling me, except I didn't call you last night. I have no idea how you got my
What the frick?
phone number." And so at the end of this phone call, the two women really had not reached any sort of explanation for how this came to be, how they came to be talking. But they ultimately just said, "Okay, hey, thanks and best of luck to you." And then they hung up. After the call was over, Sarah found herself just kind of sitting there, not really sure how to react to what had just happened. It was such a totally bizarre thing that she had just been through over the past 24 hours. And then if you include the dream, this has been a multi-year-long thing. And so on a whim, Sarah just opens up her Facebook account and she plugs in Aurora's full name because Aurora had given her full name on this phone call they had just had. And when she looked at her phone, when the results came in, Sarah nearly fainted. Right at the top of the results page was this woman, Aurora's Facebook account. And her profile picture showed her face. And when Sarah looked at her face, it was the exact same face she had seen so many times in her dreams. It was the same Aurora with striking features and long black hair. The woman in her dreams was the woman who called her and saved her life.
You know, that was pretty, for me, pretty awesome and pretty awesome.
In 2006, 73-year-old Sherman Sizemore was the definition of a man's man. He had spent the bulk of his adult life doing one of the most dangerous jobs in the world, mining for coal in West Virginia. And while he was a coal miner, he apparently had lost track of the amount of times he had nearly been killed from mine shaft collapse and gas leaks. Later on in life, after his kids had all grown up, he had retired from coal mining and become an ordained Baptist minister. And despite his harrowing backstory and burly, intimidating appearance, he was known to be incredibly gentle and very calming to his parishioners. He was also known to be an incredibly devoted grandfather, to the point where if there was a chance to spend time with his grandkids, he would basically throw all of his responsibilities out the window to do that. But in January of that year, something changed in Sherman. He went from being this pillar in the community to being a deranged, paranoid lunatic. It all started on the afternoon of January 19th. Sherman and his wife Ruby were sitting in their home alone on the couch, just kind of doing their own things, when suddenly, out of the blue, Sherman just starts screaming as if he sees something in front of him that's terrifying him, and his screams startled Ruby so that she started screaming, and so she looks at her husband, and he's still just looking straight out ahead. He's terrified of something in front of him, and so Ruby looks from him to where he's looking, and there's nothing there.
And so she turns back to her husband and she's like, what's going on? What are you screaming for? What are you so scared of? But Sherman wasn't able to speak. After he stopped screaming, he just continued to look straight out as if whatever had terrified him had him in this trance where he couldn't look away. And so his eyes are wide, his mouth is open, his face is going white, he's starting to sweat, and Ruby's starting to panic. She has no idea what's happening with him. And so eventually she just holds on to him and says, come back to me, come back to me. And Sherman at some point he kind of broke out of his trance and he looked at his wife and he just says, you can't leave me or they'll kill me. Ruby has never seen behavior like this in her husband ever. This is a completely different person she's interacting with, and so she has no idea what to do. And so instead she just kind of holds on to Sherman and prays that he doesn't start acting like that again. But that didn't happen. All day long, periodically, he would just start screaming about something that Ruby couldn't see. Now, Ruby did consider calling 911 and getting medics out there, but his behavior was so unusual, and he was normally such a rock who was so competent, who was so healthy that she didn't want to. She felt like he would just kind of get through this, that if they can just get through today and get into tomorrow, that he would be better. And so she just all day was comforting him and just dealing with these episodes. And then finally they got into bed that night, and Ruby's thinking, thank goodness we're going to wake up tomorrow and things will be better. But when she woke up the next morning, it was very obvious Sherman had not slept at all. He was looking straight up at the ceiling. He looked worse than the day before. It was obvious that he was not back to normal. And so Ruby called the rest of the family and had them come over to figure out what they were going to do. But when Sherman found out his family was coming to his house, he told Ruby they can't come inside. He was afraid they and others were conspiring to bury him alive. The only person he could be around was Ruby, and his whole family had no idea what to do. Little did they know, there was actually a very specific reason he was acting the way he was. A few months before January 19th, which was the day Sherman turned into this different person, a few months earlier, he began complaining of severe abdominal pains. And so he and his wife Ruby and his daughter, they went to the hospital, and the doctor, after examining him and running some tests, determined that most likely his pain was coming from his gallbladder. But the only way to be sure would be to do some exploratory surgery and literally look inside of Sherman's gut and look at his gallbladder and see if that was the problem. And so the doctor asked Sherman, are you prepared to do an exploratory surgery, or would you like to just kind of wait it out and see what happens with this pain? And so Sherman talked it over with his wife and his family, and they made the decision that the pain was just too much, and so they would go forward with the surgery. And so on the morning of January 19th, so again, this is the day that Sherman basically loses his mind, he goes into the hospital completely normal. He goes in with his wife, he goes in with his daughter, and he makes his way over to the surgery wing of the hospital. He says bye to his family, and he's put on a stretcher bed, and he's wheeled in and prepped for surgery, and then brought into the operating room. And while he was in the operating room, laying on his stretcher bed, flat on his back, looking straight up at all these bright lights above him, he just struck up some chit-chat with the nurses and doctors who were in the room prepping the room for surgery, and they were also putting the IV into his arm. Then at some point, one of the nurses lowered the oxygen mask onto Sherman's face so the anesthesiologist could administer the 2-drug cocktail that would knock him out for the surgery. Sherman was scheduled to get something known as general anesthesia for this operation, where basically he would be completely out, he wouldn't feel anything, they'd do the surgery, and then he would wake up in recovery. And so once this mask was on Sherman's face, the anesthesiologist began pumping him full of the drugs that would make him be knocked out for the surgery. However, the anesthesiologist only administered one of the 2 drugs necessary for
I've heard this before also.
general anesthesia. He administered the paralyzing drug, but he did not administer the actual anesthetic that would knock him out, and most importantly, would get rid of all of his pain. And so as this mask is on his face and Sherman believes he's being given the proper dosage of drugs, the nurse who was nearby told Sherman to go ahead and start counting backwards in his head from 10, knowing full well that Sherman would pass out before he reached 0. And Sherman knew this too. He had been in surgery before, and so he happily began counting in his head. 10, 9, 8, he started to feel something. 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Boom, he was out. Except he wasn't. When he reached 0 in his head, counting down, he realized he had not passed out. He began taking mental stock of what was going on, and he realized he could completely feel his body. But when he tried to move his body, he couldn't. He was completely paralyzed. When he tried to make a sound,
He couldn't because his vocal cords were also paralyzed. The only thing he could move were his eyes. He could move them left and right. However, they had taped his eyes shut, so he can't see anything. And so Sherman is thinking to himself, okay, I've been given the drugs, maybe they're slow acting, any minute now I'm going to drift off to sleep and this will just be a distant memory. But after a few seconds, he's hearing the doctors and nurses in the room. He can't see them, but he hears them. They seem to be moving towards doing this operation, and he's still awake. And so Sherman becomes frantic and starts flicking his eyes left and right as fast as he possibly can. And the rapid eye movement actually loosened the tape on both of his eyelids, and it created a tiny slit that he could actually look through. And what he saw terrified him. The surgeon was walking over next to him. He was getting his gloves on. And then the surgeon says, "Scalpel." And the nurse hands him this chrome metallic blade. And the surgeon takes the blade and begins cutting into Sherman's midsection. Sherman felt everything, but Sherman couldn't do anything about it. All he could do was rapidly flick his eyes left and right in hopes one of them would see that he was awake, that he was feeling this. But no one was paying attention to his face, so they didn't see his eyes moving around. And so the surgeon continued to cut into his midsection until he had cut out a fairly significantly sized hole, at which point the surgeon hands the scalpel to the nurse and says, "Clamps," at which point the nurse hands him what looks like a torture device, and the surgeon proceeds to use these clamps to pin segments of Sherman's skin that has just been cut open to his body to basically keep the hole open. And then the surgeon began tugging on the outsides of this hole in Sherman's midsection, making sure it was big enough that he could actually get a good look into his body. And every little tug is sending lightning bolts of pain into Sherman's body. But again, all he can do is flick his eyes left and right, and no one's paying attention. Scope, the surgeon called out for, and the nurse handed him a camera that he jammed into Sherman's gut. And then the surgeon said, "Suction," and the nurse got what looked like a vacuum and pressed it inside of this open wound and began sucking out fluids from his body. The pain Sherman was experiencing is unimaginable. Every second felt like an eternity. Forceps, the surgeon called, and the nurse handed him these metal prongs that he put inside of this hole in Sherman's body, and he used them to dislodge his gallbladder so he could get a better look at it. By this point, Sherman wanted to die. He was no longer flicking his eyes left and right. He was just looking straight out, hoping someone would finally see him. And someone did. One of the nurses standing next to the surgeon looked up at Sherman's face and saw Sherman looking back, terrified at the nurse, at which point the nurse yelled out, "Stop, he's awake, he's awake!" And the surgeon practically faints, and he looks over at the anesthesiologist and he calls him, "Get over here and fix this." And so the anesthesiologist comes running over from the side of the room. He gets up next to Sherman and begins pumping him full of painkillers. And as he's doing this, he has this moment of clarity. He remembers he didn't give him the anesthetic. And so as these new painkillers that have just been introduced begin to take their effect, Sherman's eyes go from being terrified to glazed over, and he does pass off to sleep. And so now he's out and he can't feel anything. But now the anesthesiologist and the medical team realize they have a very big problem. This patient just experienced 16 minutes of surgery and felt all of it. And at the end of it, when he wakes up, he's going to remember it, and he's probably going to file a lawsuit against the hospital. And so a decision was made. It's unclear if the anesthesiologist acted alone or if the entire team was in on this. But regardless, the anesthesiologist administered an additional drug after giving all these painkillers. This additional drug was called midazolam, but it's better known as the amnesia drug. And like its nickname implies, anyone who gets it will forget what has just happened to them. And so the idea was, by giving him this amnesia drug, he won't remember the trauma he had suffered through during the surgery, and so wouldn't file a lawsuit. And so after he was given this drug, the medical team, they went back to doing the surgery, they completed it, and they got him back out to recovery. And then when Sherman woke up in recovery, he did not remember what had happened to him inside of the operating room, at least not consciously. Those horrible 16 minutes had been implanted on Sherman's subconscious. Basically, his body recognized that he had experienced extreme trauma. However, the amnesia drug wiped away the memory of how he received that trauma. So there's this big disconnect in his memory. And so when Sherman came to in the recovery room, he immediately sensed something was horribly, horribly wrong. He was scared, he was anxious, he had this incredible sense of dread, but he had no memory to tie these feelings to. And so as Sherman is sitting in recovery, he must have tried to kind of hide the way he was feeling because he didn't even remotely understand it. He had been completely happy and normal going into the surgery, and now a couple of hours later, he's a complete mess. And so he leaves the hospital that day on January 19th. He goes back to his house and he sits.
Let's just finish this particular story and then I'm gonna bookmark this video so we can listen to it maybe tomorrow or some other day.
On the couch with his wife, and as he's sitting there, suddenly these horrible feelings he's having, they become too much, and he basically has a panic attack, and he starts screaming out, and he's terrified of something, but he doesn't know what it is. And then, over the next couple of days, he began having these flashbacks where he would access the actual 16 minutes of torture he went through, but when he would see someone cutting into him and opening his chest up and sucking things out of it, he didn't think, that happened to me, and that's why I feel this way. Instead, he thought it was just this horrible nightmare that he couldn't escape from. And so his family did eventually start getting doctors and psychologists and all these people involved to figure out what was wrong with him. But before they could figure it out, the whole situation had just become too terrible for Sherman. And so on February 2nd, just 2 weeks after he came out of that surgery, he would take his own life. His family was unbelievably heartbroken. It didn't seem real that this had happened. And so they would continue to dig and figure out what went wrong. And they would finally get their hands on the medical report from the gallbladder exploratory surgery on January 19th. And after giving it to another doctor to look over, this doctor discovered that Sherman had in fact experienced 16 minutes of something known as anesthesia awareness, where you are awake or feel a portion of your surgery. And shockingly, this happens to 20,000 people a year. However, Sherman's case, forgetting the amnesia drug, just literally what he went through, 16 full minutes of this really intensive surgery that he felt, that is an absolute rarity. That does not happen very often. Sherman's family would go on to sue the hospital, and they would be awarded an undisclosed amount of money from the hospital in 2008.
Alright. Let's bookmark this. 27 minutes. There with the timestamp. Okay guys, you know, I'm gonna be reviewing for my exam. Their last message to me yesterday was to kindly check if it's available on my end, you know. I'm really hoping right now, I'm hoping it's there. Please. Please God, please universe, please fate, please be there. So yeah, thank you so much guys. I'll talk about my day tomorrow. Okay, bye bye. See ya. Thank you. And I'll be riding my bike later. I'm going out today. Okay? You take care as well. Bye bye. Bye bye.